Mr. A here, saying, how y'all doing?
Yo! Are you ready to rumble? Or should I say tumble? Cause I don't stumble or fumble like a cracker by a gumbo. Standing on the ground, flat feet firm, killing worms and germs, and I'm doing it on my terms.
Welcome to the Rumble. We are back and better than ever, helping you stay ready so you don't have to get ready. We don't want you sucker punch, so we're here each and every week helping you keep your guard up. I am Jeremy Lavelle with Remedy Claims Consulting, at Claims Coach on Instagram and TikTok, and they just call me the mouth of the South. Alongside of me is the Countess of Content, Miss Ricky McGregor, and the statistically satirical, the sarcastically stimulating, the one, the only baby cakes, Miss Donna Lavelle. How's everybody doing?
Good.
How you doing, Ricky?
Good.
I think I should mention that I didn't mention in the intro that I should have mentioned in the intro is the fact that Ricky owns and operates Monarch Claim Services. So she has her own sort of expertise when it comes to contents, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. But first of all, I want to jump on over to Baby Cakes and see if there's any fun facts that we can be talking about.
There are some fun facts, and they are brought to you by Inc., the best way to get paid after a property claim. Inc., save time, get paid. So Japan has one vending machine for every 40 people in the country.
That makes for shorter lines. That's for sure. You know, like when you're at a sporting event or something like that, you know, you don't have the lines that are so long to get. Well, never mind. It's certainly shorter lines. That's all I'm going to say.
I think that like probably a third of those are panties.
You think so? Women's underwear.
Yeah.
Yes, here we go. I mean, no bras, though?
Oh, my God.
We may have to edit that out.
Great. God.
Sorry. Okay, let me get myself together. Okay, there we go.
Well, I'm sure a few do, but you know, they wear baggy clothing over there. Is all I'm saying.
I don't know why I can't stop laughing. Scotland has 421 words for snow.
420. Well, they could come up with a 422nd one. I'm thinking that's a good round number, but 421 words for snow. Do you have any examples? I know one of them is probably
Snow.
Yeah, there we go.
I have no examples other than snow.
What the other 420 are? Oh, I get it now. There's 420. Get it? Never mind.
Again. Also, Scotland chose the unicorn as their national animal.
There you go. I would make a unicorn sound at this point in time, but I don't know what they sound like, being the fact that they don't exist.
I would think they sound like horses.
Well, how would you know?
Because they're horses with horns.
You know what I think they do? I think they sound like donkeys. That's what I think they sound like, is donkeys.
They whinny. They sound pretty.
Well, okay. Well, fair enough. I mean, we'll just have to agree to disagree on that, and there's no real way to prove it. But anyway, what else we got?
Fruit Loops are all the same flavor.
Despite the different colors, they're all the same. I feel defrauded.
I swear they're different. I swear they are.
Yep, I feel defrauded.
Next, they're going to tell me Skittles are all the same flavor.
There's no way that Skittles are all the same flavor. They taste different.
Yeah.
But with Fruit Loops
taste different too.
I don't know. I mean, could we get... I mean, I would think if they tasted different, they would make like all red ones.
You mean Oops All Red?
Yeah,
like
something like
Oops
that.
All Crunch Berries. What do you think, Ricky?
I don't know. I guess I could see that they're all the same flavor. I mean, you eat them all at once. What's the difference?
Yeah, that's true. You can't eat Fruit Loops one at a time.
I do.
Right?
That's just exhausting.
I eat them as a snack.
I guess in art, you can make one of those Fruit Loop necklaces or, you know, some Christmas tree ornaments with Fruit Loops.
I can eat it off the necklace like a
Yeah, there you go. You can do that.
That's
Do you,
all I got.
do you remember the candy necklaces? Yeah, I remember
Yep.
those. Yeah, those are disgusting.
Now you know, and knowing is half the bullshit.
Knowing is half the bullshit. Well, guys, we have got an incredible show. I want to remind you that it's going to be coming to you in 3 rounds, but we are going to be discussing all things content. When you hear this sound, you know that the round has begun. And when you hear this sound, you know that the round is over. So we're going to be discussing all things content, as I said before, but Ricky and I, while we may disagree on some items here and there, mainly it is a discussion to address the things that you guys are in the trenches fighting every day, because it is you that is in the rumble. It is not us. And so buckle up, settle in. We're going to dig into content and everything that you can think about that we can cover in the next hour. Round 1 starts right after this. Public adjusters, listen up. It's Jeremy Lavelle, owner of Remedy Claims Consulting, host of The Rumble, and most importantly, your claims coach. Public adjuster training is one of the hardest things to find. Sure, you can take some online seminars, you can show up to conferences, but none of them tailor training just for you until now. Whether you need to learn how to estimate, scope, negotiate, or prospect, I can help you drill down on the skills you want to develop. Maybe you're just starting out and you need to learn the claims process from A to Z, or you're just wanting help on strategy on a specific claim. I can help you find the traction you are looking for and learn how to truly control the narrative in the ever-changing world of claims. You can reach out to me directly at 888-596-8772, or you can find me on the web at remedyclaims.com and just click Get Started. That's 888-596-8772 or remedyclaims.com and click Get Started. You can even shoot me an email at jeremy@remedyclaims.com. That's JEROMY@remedyclaims.com. It's time to move your career to the next level. Round 1, taking the inventory. Well, the first thing that I learned when I was working with Ricky, to be perfectly honest with you, the very first thing that I learned was there is a difference between an assessment and an inventory. So I want to be careful that, because round 2 has more to do with the assessment, but there is really a big difference between an assessment and an inventory. And so as public adjusters, one of the things that you're really wanting to communicate information on initially when you walk into a claim, whether it's a water loss or a fire, you may even have some toxic material like an asbestos claim or a lead paint claim, those kinds of things where we have to take care. You want to take a look at the inventory and what the chances are of it being affected by whatever peril. So when you go in and you take an inventory, these are the initial things that you're doing. Now, mainly what I do, and I learned as a public adjuster who thought I could work contents, was I always noticed all the big stuff, the televisions, the furniture, the beds. And I would say it's really not that much stuff. We've got a desk and an office and I would go through each room and just kind of name the furniture that was in the room, but it is far greater than that. So what are some things that we should be noticing, Ricky, when we're looking at the inventory? Because I think it goes without saying that we can see all of the furniture. The furniture is that's the easy part, but what are some of the more difficult things we should be looking at when we're assessing an inventory initially?
So when you arrive on site, I would say that I'll say this first, first and foremost, dedicating an hour to actually scoping the property is going to be really beneficial. Like you said, when you walk in, it's very obvious. You're going to see the big things, furniture and things of that nature. But you really need to take the time to go through every room, open drawers, open closets, take note of the little things. When you open their closets, when you look at their clothes and things like that, look at the brands that they have. Even when it comes to furniture, what type of furniture do they have? Where did it come from? Or are they antiques? Do they have artwork? There's just so many different things. I'm trying to wrap my head around it. And that's just one little question, because I could go
Yeah.
on and on.
Let me just say this. Let me say this when we're dealing with inventories. First of all,
Right.
what I want you to know is it's the second largest coverage that's available. And that according other than coverage A, because generally it is between 70 and 80% value of coverage A. And usually, if you have an endorsement on the policy that's for expanded replacement cost, that is also going to apply to contents as well. And generally, that expanded replacement cost value is generally around 25%. So those are the things that you're wanting to look at. And so when I was in the pandemic, and coming right out of the pandemic, one of the things that we have encountered is an excessive amount of inflation, right? All of us have seen the inflation that sort of happened. It now costs $5 to get a Coke at a restaurant when it used to cost, $2.50 or $2.25, and now it's just so much more expensive. So all of us in some kind of way have been impacted by the inflation that the country has seen. And so this endorsement really kind of goes in there. But the one thing that you really want to look at as public adjusters is kind of the capacity of the inventory. Are we talking about one room, or are we talking about the
Mm-hmm.
entire house? And that's one of the very first things that I look at. And I want you to think kind of as you walk through it, look at the individual rooms and make the rooms kind of stand on their own. Now, when Ricky and I first worked a contents claim together, which and we've worked a few now. We've got some water under the bridge, don't we, Ricky? I mean, we've
Yeah.
come into some challenging claims
Yeah.
that
Make you pull your hair out. Make you pull your hair out at night,
I need to make an appointment with my therapist real quick. Hang on
Yeah.
just a second, and I can tell Dr. Finkelstein that we've got some other things to discuss other than mom. So, the point is that when you're looking at these things, I want you to look. One of the things that I have done and that I really learned from Ricky, and Ricky's being modest here, but one of the things is looking at the immensity of the inventory, and I can see the big stuff, but it's the stuff inside the drawers. I see the dresser, but I don't see the junk drawer inside that dresser, or all of the different, the 47 Van Halen t-shirts and all of the different socks. And it depends on your apparel whether or not it is going to be inventoried, or whatever the case may be, depending on the apparel and what the damage that they're up against is really kind of a big question. And the other thing that you might look at is sort of, depending on the apparel, whether or not the majority of this stuff is something that is that you're going to want to conduct some mitigation on. You know what I mean? Is this
Yeah.
something that can be restored or whatever? And so what are some of the things that you're looking at maybe, and I don't want to get ahead into round two when we start talking about sort of the assessment of it, but when you're looking at this, you have a finite amount of coverage. So what are some of the thoughts that run through your brain, Ricky, as you're looking at this and kind of what your next step is?
So typically when we get a call, I'll kind of just walk you through the
That'd be
process as
great.
far as
That's perfect.
so typically when we get a call, what we like to see, what I would ask, an adjuster. I work, across the board with a few different people. So, what we would look for, we would ask them, like, do you have photos? We are going to ask you for photos. What was the loss? Where was the loss? And honestly, what's the degree of loss? You have total loss, fire. You have pipe burst. You have freezing. You have all types of different scenarios. So, depending on what's all affected, as far as if it affected one room, like you said, if it affected multiple rooms, where it happened in the house, and what was the trickle down effect of that. So we're going to ask those type of questions. Then we're going to ask that you send photos, so we can see the damage in the home. For example, if it's a water loss, we want to see where the mold's at. If it's in more than one space, if it's in multiple, so that we can determine how many rooms we're talking about. Then those photos also help us determine the amount of stuff that is in the home. If we get photos that are, let's say, 4-corner photos, typically when we're on site, we would take 4-corner photos. So we'll ask for those. If we can only see the furniture, but we don't know what's in the drawers, that could be a problem. We really don't have an accurate idea of what's really in the home. And that's also going to help an adjuster, anybody on site. That's really going to give them insight into the level of inventory that you're going to need, the level of things that you're going to need to go through, because you have to remember an inventory is just that. It is going through every single item in a property. And if you were to take the property, flip it upside down, anything that fell out, that you would take with you is something that would go on an inventory report.
Sure.
So, yeah.
I just want to interject something here is that, and we probably will get into this a little bit more in future rounds, but understand that this inventory is a full-on bona fide duty after a loss. And so this inventory is absolutely, if you're going to claim it, then you're going to have to create the inventory. And I'm going to get into some other details about that from one of the things that the public adjuster would run into kind of as opposed to the content specialist. And I will get into this, but this inventory. So if you think that you're going to get out of the inventory or you're going to throw it on the homeowner, I want to put the screech and halt on that right now, because the homeowner is not, even though it's a duty after the loss, 99% of the time is not going to be able to complete this inventory with any level of accuracy whatsoever. So understanding that this is super important, and I call this the post-it notes and paper clips of everything, because we all see the big stuff. It's the little stuff. So Ricky, did you finish your thought? Or I don't want to cut you off here, because I definitely have a question here that I want to get into.
Yeah, I believe I finished, at least as far as our process and that initial, what you're going to want to look for, even before contacting or even making that decision to contact a content expert.
Well, here at Remedy Claims, I mean, obviously pictures are really handy as far as quickly communicating, but we use a Matterport quite often, especially if we're dealing with a large loss. Baby Cakes is going to show up with her enormous trunk and break that thing out, and she's going to start her Matterport thing. And you know, Donna does a lot of really interesting things, especially where you have a very heavy content area, such as a kitchen. She'll go through and she'll open cabinet doors and she'll open drawers and all kinds of things, not only to see what kind of cabinets are there, but kind of what's in there and what we're up against. Do you prefer pictures, or do you like the Matterport, or do you need some sort of combination of both? And what information are you looking for out of each of those different mediums, so to speak?
Photos are probably our last option, but they're better than nothing. I would say that a Matterport, would be more effective. I can navigate through all levels of the house. We can get a good picture of what's in the home, get close up, really look at stuff, almost like we're there. So
that's the idea.
That's the That's the idea, which is why it's great. It's more efficient. It allows us to give you more of an accurate estimate of what would be needed for content specialists, or actually any inventory staff, to come in and effectively document all the items in the home.
So, I mean, and look, a Matterport is good for a multitude of reasons here, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the things when I go in is I basically, usually, I'm going to tell you this right now. It takes me about 10 minutes to determine whether or not the inventory matters to me. And a lot of you were thinking, well, is it going to be a fire? Is it because it's a water loss? Or is it because, no, it's because if I count more than 25 items that are involved in this, I'm on the phone to a content specialist, because it's already out of my depth. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, and as a public adjuster, you're not really supposed to be a content specialist, you know, and even though they try to lay that at our feet to somehow understand we're coverage specialists, and what we're going to do and kind of what we think is owed for underneath the policy, not necessarily what the carrier is going to do, but what's owed for. And so I am going to do that. And so I am trying to figure out the information that if it's something worth taking pictures of, I'm probably already going to be contacting Ricky. And one of the things that I learned is I have often counted to 25 or 24 and said, I can handle this. It's the amount of stuff that I miss, even in a small loss, that is almost staggering when it comes to thinking about either packing something out or restore or whatever action needs to be taken for this kind of thing. So in the inventory, let me ask you this question. This is something we haven't discussed, so I'm going to kind of throw you a curveball here, and I hope that's okay. What do you do as an inventory specialist as far as a pack out companies that you have worked with? What if you run into things that are always a concern, such as like firearms and ammunition, and there's also like maybe rare coins or cash of some sort of something along those lines when you get into those very special items. But here in Texas, if we're working in Texas, you can damn sure count you're going to come across a firearm. Mm-hmm. So how do you guys look at that? Is there instructions that you give the homeowners, or kind of what do you do there?
Yeah, in regards to ammunition specifically, we write it all off. No matter what, it's always replaced. As far as the firearms, we require them to take them to a specialist for cleaning. We don't transport firearms. We don't ask mitigation companies to transport firearms. I personally wouldn't let them. If I was working on site and running a content claim the way that we typically do, we would ask them, hey, who would you use that you could have these cleaned at and inspect them, and then we get the invoice for it, and then we submit it to the carrier for things like that. Rare coins, we document them. If they're comfortable with the mitigation company taking them, we document that the mitigation company has taken them, just so we don't run into issues with theft and things like that.
Jewelry, high value items.
Yeah.
That's what what?
Yeah. So jewelry, typically we would tell them to take them to a jeweler. We would not have the average mitigation company take high value items. To be honest, we more look to outsource that to specialists.
Is there any sort of protocol if they said, look, I want them to take it? Is there any sort of protocol that you would recommend when it comes to these high value items and things like that? Because I work with a client, you and I have worked with a client that has got some very high end stuff, that is always a concern. So, when we have those sort of, do you do like a separate schedule for that high end stuff?
As far as scheduling for, and just for clarification, are you talking about a schedule like on the list as far as keeping it separate? Or are you talking
items? Schedule of items, like what time of day would show up, but a schedule of items.
Right, schedule of. No, I didn't know if you meant as far as the process, like bringing someone in, like being on site with them, and so we actually separate that out into its own list. And we document where it's going, so we know who has it and when it comes back. And then we tie the invoice to that list and submit it in a separate binder from the claim.
Well, it always seems like that first round goes by really quick. So, just to kind of, because remember, because what you're going to do, because what we get into in round two is really all about the assessment and the differences, kind of what we're going to do with the inventory kind of once we've done it. But the thing that I want to bring up most importantly is that it is a duty after the laws, and it's not just the responsibility of the list, but there's also the pricing and the depreciation that comes with the responsibility. So you as a public adjuster, that is essentially, and you've heard me say it 1,000 times, your job is to help the insured, or to, in place of the insured, fulfill the duties after a loss. It is your job to create this inventory. So it's important for the benefit of your client that this thing is accurate, and there is nothing wrong with calling in help on it. And I'm going to get into kind of what we're going to do here in a little bit as far as the salvageable and unsalvageable in round two. But and it requires you to price and depreciate these items as well. So it's not just the list, and you want to make sure that this thing is really accurate. Do you have any final thoughts on round one? Something that you maybe didn't get out there, Ricky, or are you good to go?
I think I'm good to go. If it pops up, I'll probably just pop it in there.
Back to, insert that. But so
Circle
that's
back.
all things inventory. We're going to get into kind of making the assessment on the items in round two, because it starts right after this.
One of the most difficult claims you can work is a contents claim. It requires extreme detail and significant documentation. Ricky McGregor with Monarch Claim Services is the expert you need on your side. She will handle on-site evaluation, inventory, photo documentation, pricing, and overall contents claim organization. She will work with your team beginning to end so you can focus on the rest of the claim. Do your client a favor and call Ricky McGregor with Monarch Claim Services. You can reach her at 515-783-1434. That's 515-783-1434, or find her on the web at monarchclaimservices.com.
Round 2, the assessment of salvageable versus unsalvageable. So once the inventory is done, this inventory is going to fall into one of two categories: salvageable and unsalvageable. So, and then I want to try to work in some depreciation theory here, because when we determine something salvageable or we determine something that's unsalvageable, then we got to be thinking depreciation kind of all at the same time when we determine that it's unsalvageable. But when we start making these assessments, what are some of the key point indicators that you're looking for when you make these determinations, whether it's contaminant, whether it's worth it, that kind of thing? What are the key points that you're looking for?
Let me think about that. Honestly, we typically will determine that based off of what we discussed in round 1. When we make that connection with the public adjuster or whoever we're working with, we can kind of then tell if this is just going to be a general inventory or if there's going to need to be an assessment. For example, if there's water damage, everything is going to have to be packed out. Depending on, where the damage is. But most of the time, everything has to be packed out. At that, specifically in water losses, as we both know, a lot of times you're looking at assessing. So now we're looking at an item. We're not only determining if it's non-salvageable versus salvageable, but we may be looking at something and say, is this item cost effective to wrap up, put in a box, transport, and store for the duration of the mitigation process? So there's no clear-cut line. When you're, for example, in a fire and something's burnt up completely, you're okay, that's not usable, so we're going to write that off. But now we're going to look at an item, for example, in a house with asbestos. Does it make sense to pack up the paper towels and store them for 7 months? So that's really some of the things that we look for when it comes to assessing a specific item. I could go off for days on this topic. So you'll have to reel me in a little bit.
Well, you and I actually had, let me, and I use this example. I use this example with a lot of adjusters because this is something that actually happened to Ricky and myself. We had a water loss that we were working, and one of the things that we had listed as unsalvageable was a plunger. And the adjuster balked at a plunger because I can't believe you're claiming water damage on a plunger, like we were being fraudulent or something like that. And I was like, well, when it comes to packing up and storing something for a $2.38 plunger, I would think that it would just be better to not spend the labor to wrap it, to pack it, and to store it, and just to replace it. It's not cost effective. It's just easier to basically, write it off as unsalvageable because it's cheaper to go and buy another one than it is to do all of those sorts of things. And so, while it may not be physically damaged by something, it has to be addressed because it's something that has to get out of the house.
Right.
And, especially when you're dealing with a contaminant such as asbestos, you know what I mean? Like we use plungers in Cat 3 situations all the time, and then we just pull it out and set it next to our toilet constantly. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
right.
So, there's not a whole lot that can damage a plunger other than maybe a fire that melts it or burns it up or something like that. And so I use that concept and that idea sort of as a barometer on whether or not this is something we're going to pack and store. Again, I default pretty much any time I look at Ricky, because sometimes it's not always as clear cut as a plunger. You get those things that are very, very borderline. And so when you get that thing that's borderline, sort of what do you do in that situation, Ricky?
So, for example, I'll say this: furniture. We have dressers and things like that have been exposed to moisture. You'll see, and it could mean like a lot to someone. We've had those before where their furniture means a lot to them. And because they're projects, they would like to keep it, but it does not, because of the type of material, for example, that it could be made out of. It is actually not cost effective to try and restore it. And most times it would actually cost more. So in that instance, for example, we would replace it, even if it's just a little bit of damage at that point. So I guess there's so many different things that you can look at, and I'm trying to think of like when I'm in the claim, I can make these split quick decisions because I can look at something and say, oh, there's mold here. All right, this is what we're going to do with this. This is the particle board. So we're just going to replace this, and that goes there, and then this goes here. But I'm really trying to figure out what we're looking for. My mind is all over the place, Jeremy. Reel me back in, because I feel like I'm in the field and I'm trying to.
Right, and you're trying to make this. So the idea here sometimes is basically the carrier is going to come from the standpoint that they want everything cleaned and restored and returned back to the house, and they don't want to pay for anything. You know what I mean? That is generally what they're trying to support. That is going to be their narrative. Whereas you as a public adjuster, I am going to tell you that there's a couple of, what you're going to do is all you're doing is creating a list and an item, because I believe that really this assessment, while out of a courtesy we're doing this, is really something that should be, part of the carrier's investigation. You know what I mean? And so, what they want to do, but often I'll go into an assessment because I am going to want to control what happens to this item.
Right.
And whether we salvage it or unsalvage it, it's still not really up to us what gets done with that. That is still absolutely 100% the homeowner's call. Where you get into sort of a disagreement sometimes with a homeowner is, let's say that you've got, I'm going to use smoke damage just on in this example. Let's say you had a fire in the laundry room and you had a smoke out that has, and it's a light smoke. It was brought under containment pretty quick, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we're not talking about an excessive amount of damage. In fact, the entire inventory is going to fall under what I would call the borderline call. You know what I mean? We're looking at it, and you've got some electronic equipment. Now, most public adjusters and mitigation people and all of this are going to look at something and they're going to say, well, smoke is highly corrosive. That's the one thing that I know about smoke, is that it's corrosive. And so corrosive would tell me that is a condition that is going to occur over an amount of time. What it looks like today is going to be very different if left untreated, very different what it would look like, 2 or 3 months from now. And so the carrier is going to want you to try to clean that smoke damaged component, right? And we're trying to make the assessment based on how bad it is. Maybe that homeowner wants it replaced because they had their eye on a new one a long time ago, or there's all of those things that come into play. And generally you're going to have to sometimes, by working with the content specialist, and because I look at Ricky all the time, I go, what's the carrier going to want to do here? Is the carrier going to want to clean it? And she always tells me that they want to clean everything. But I'm like, well, the question is really, can it be cleaned to the point where this electronic piece of equipment, are they going to, and the question is the carrier going to own this thing if we try to clean it and determine it can't be cleaned, which is another tricky thing. and so sometimes the homeowner is not attached to this item at all, and they just want a new one, whether it's a laptop or whether it's a television or speakers or something like that, where they're not going to be mad at the newer next higher model, right? And so that's what we're going to be replacing it with. And so making that assessment sometimes is a little bit difficult. And what you want to be able to do is set those expectations for your homeowner, because the reality is most of that stuff at the end of the day has a grand possibility of being cleaned. Electronics aside, there are some items that are rather sealed that smoke may not invade. Now, I know a bunch of people are going to be throwing rocks at me here, but if it's a rather sealed unit and it can be cleaned, then more than likely that's what we're going to default towards. And do you find yourself doing that quite a bit, Ricky? Like on like a smoke damage claim, what do you feel like the percentage of things that need to be written off versus cleaned in a smoke damage claim?
When it comes to smoke damage, it really depends on the degree of smoke. If you have smoke, will definitely do more damage than a fire if it's a full-on smoke. If you have a lighter smoke claim, depending on where it is in the property, that really determines the process. I'll be honest, that is probably one of the most extensive processes that we have. It is probably one of the most time-consuming when it comes to very light damage, because for example, electronics, if let's say you have an electronic component that's really close to, where the fire started, it was greatly affected, we're going to write it off. We can't guarantee that it'll work. You can test it today and it won't work tomorrow. That's kind of a given. But when you have electronics that are far away, that never lost power, that still have power, as far as, when the marshal comes in and, shuts down power, and they have the company shut down power to certain parts of the house, you have to get them tested. I know it's more of a what would you say, technicality, as far as what
it's
are you,
pro forma.
yeah,
Is really
yeah.
Pro forma.
Yeah. Thank you for that, because I was looking for the word. So it's something that you have to do in order to get it written off, because you can test it and then you make the argument, it works right now, but you can't guarantee that it's not going to work later. And that's kind of some of the issues you run into when doing an assessment. You spend a lot of time going that extra step because they want every item inspected. Because like you said, the insurance company is going to say, hey, this can be cleaned, but we're not going to clean paper clips. We're not going to clean paper. We need to account for those things. We account for pieces of paper, even though to some it's like, why would you count paper? Why, you keep that stuff, that pictures, you might not be able to replace them, but you're entitled to the reprint fee. You're entitled to the prescription bottles. You're entitled to the toilet paper. So though that is really where, once again, we jump back into round one a little bit. If you open doors, if you open closets, if you're going in all the nooks and crannies, and sometimes you might run into stuff that's really uncomfortable because it happens doing an inventory. You are invading someone's personal space, and you have to really have a good knowledge of what is in your home, what your insureds have, because that is going to have to be inspected, which then ties into really how much time it's going to take to complete that assessment.
And I just want to interject. One of the things that Ricky and I were talking about off the air was making a determination of whether or not this item really even needs to be claimed, because we're all trying to get to a number here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to figure out, because most content, I'm going to say by and large, what I have found, if you have got a larger loss, so to speak, if you've got a widespread water loss, much like the one Ricky and I worked this weekend, or you've got a fire, you've got something along those lines, there are going to be some things that just aren't going to be cost effective to replace, because you have a finite amount of coverage and you want that coverage to be applied to the bigger items that you're going to want to get replaced. So, and Ricky and I worked like an entire burnout on one where she completely reconstructed the inventory, and we had a finite amount of coverage. And what I see a lot of times, and I want to give you a warning on this, and Ricky sees this happen a lot too, is when we start wrapping and packaging, storaging, remember that money money doesn't go into the insured's pocket. That money goes into the people who are moving and storing the contents. It goes into their pocket, and they will never, because you're going to have to pay that invoice. And that's the other thing I want to say on the assessment, whether you're getting, things determining whether or not things can be cleaned or whether things that need to be tested. Some of those things from the upfront, if you've got a good feeling about it, then, those are, the question kind of comes in, because if you get the assessment and you call in the people to do the assessment, whether it's a first team or a CRDN or whoever it is, your own third party to come in and assess it, that invoice is then usually paid out of the coverage. Whereas if the carrier steps up and pays for some of those things, as far as an assessment goes, and an assessment is not cleaning, and an assessment is not replacement. It's to look at it and determine, hey, what do we need to do with this thing? This thing can be cleaned, or this thing. That assessment, sometimes I hold the carrier's feet to the fire on making that determination to be tested, so that that comes under their administrative burden, and it is not taken away from the limits of liability. And that's one of the things that Ricky and I are even doing right now on a claim, is we actually went through the burden of the assessment. The assessment was paid out of coverage. Okay. And then now they're coming back, and we turned that assessment in. And what did they do, Ricky? They said, oh, we want to have somebody else look at it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like, well, wait a minute. Why, if that's what you were going to do, and it's not, and you're clearly not taking my assessment. So some of those things, if you're going to go through the trouble of being assessed, it's like, I would get on the phone with the carrier and go, what is your intention here? So no matter what we find, are you going to accept this, or are you going to want to take a different look at it? Because in particular, the one that I'm talking about, we were dealing with, I don't know, $500,000 worth of stereo equipment. And it wasn't that much stuff. You know what I mean? We're not talking about 1,000 line items. We're talking about 11 or 12 line items that was $500,000 in stereo equipment. So you've got to consider these things, and you don't want to chew up your limits in package and storing and cleaning. So you want to be careful about those things. Well, again, that went really fast. We're going to kind of get into the different, the next big thing that we're going to be dealing with is pricing in round 3, and how we handle that. Round 3 starts right after this. When choosing someone to help with your online marketing, make sure you go with someone that has years of experience. Our good friend Sally at Thrive has over 20 years of digital marketing experience. She can build you a beautiful 15-page, sleek, interactive website, post on your social media platforms multiple times a week. She can do a video, an amazing CRM to manage and maintain and nurture your clients, text, email marketing, review generation, a business listing on 60+ search engines, including 3 voice networks, appointment scheduling, estimates, invoices, payment processing, and more. She will also create for you on Google, a Facebook page, in Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. If you need these for your businesses, she'll help you create those pages on all of those sites. If you already have these pages, she'll optimize them for you as well. Call or message Sally today. If you want to get started, you can reach her at 214-789-1651. Again, her name is Sally Brigance. Her number is 214-789-1651. And you'll also get a landing page the day you sign up. When you send her a referral that signs up with her, she'll credit your billing account. Logos are also available, and she also offers a lead generation service and SEO, search engine optimization, where she can guarantee you to appear on the first page of Google or your money back. It is spelled THRYV, and you can find my good friend Sally Brigance, and that's spelled SALLIE, Brigance, BRIGANCE, and she can be reached once again at 214-789-1651. Round 3, pricing and depreciation. So there is the super popular one that's out there, which is exact content. And then you've also got there's a couple of different ways that you can price it. But I know, and I'm curious to hear this, Ricky, how do you handle pricing? Because I know you specifically do not use exact contents. So how do you go about that process?
So we actually use Encircle. I really enjoy their pricing program. But what I do at the beginning of a claim is I always fill out like a customer store reference sheet with the insureds, so that we have a good idea of where they like to shop. Because like I said, you don't want to replace it from Walmart if they even bought it from Target, because Target's kind of expensive too. But
And you
you
don't want
know,
to replace it when they bought it at Pottery Barn either. So.
right? But um, some people, like, if they shop at Target, they don't shop at Walmart, and that's a real thing. I run into that. But yes, like you said, if they shop at Pottery Barn, we don't want to buy from Walmart. Their clothes, like, same thing. So we fill that out with them. We keep the insureds very in the loop during the process. We research the retailers that they use for furniture, electronics, if they use specialty stores. If some of our insureds have people that they directly work with, as far as that they have relationships with, and we'll get invoicing from them. I mean, we'll contact the manufacturer if we can't seem to validate pricing. Um, so that's kind of how we start off that process, and then we transfer it in, and we plug in that price point through Encircle, and then we go from there.
So I may have missed it here. So do you just do research on the internet from like Target Online and Amazon and all those different things, and you insert the prices individually rather than working off of like a database or something like that? I mean, do you even pull in like UPC codes or anything like that?
So the program that we use pulls the information. It allows us to search different engines. So we can search Amazon, we can use Google, we can use Walmart. It has a series, and then it will also allow us to plug in our own retailers in the search engine. But the reason we use the Encircle platform is because it auto populates and generates that report. So it helps with the processing time, as far as us not manually having to type in Walmart, Target, and model numbers and all that type of stuff. It just automatically populates it when we price through the database.
Because I can't imagine going into Target.com and looking for pink flip-flops with flowers on it. You know what I mean? And go, okay, these are clothes.
So
You know what I'm saying?
I will say, with items like that, when it comes, we have a reference sheet of items that are under $100, or certain things like the tip. We'll give an average. Hardback books, soft. Paperback
Sure.
books, things like
Yeah.
that. So we
Yeah.
have that our team works off of, that can quickly go through stuff like that. Typically, the carrier is not going to question you too much about items that's $50 and below. So we have a general price sheet that we use, so people can kind of speed through that. When it comes to things like that. Now, we also will record price points. Some people we'll ask them, do you have a price point that you spend on your socks per pair? Do you like Nike? Do you like and one from Walmart? Things like that. So we'll also price based on price point, because some things you just won't find in the database. Let's say you have restored furniture, antique furniture, things like that. That's when you would start reaching out to, if you want to use web-based, like Cherish and things like that, if they don't have a retailer that they work with specifically. But then that's when you would start contacting the manufacturers if they have high-end equipment and things like that. You have to do more research. So depending on the complexity of the claim and their items, that kind of determines how much time you're actually spending on the research part of the pricing.
So when it comes to, once you have that pricing kind of done, you've got a new task in front of you, and that's depreciation. And I want to tell you, as the public adjuster, this doesn't really fall into the next part of depreciation doesn't really fall on the shoulders of the content specialist. While they can be very helpful and very knowledgeable about it, communicating the depreciation to your contents person, whether they're in-house or whether you've outsourced it to somebody, you as the public adjuster need to understand the depreciation process, especially when it comes to contents, because it's a little bit different than your normal efforts of depreciation. So first of all, you've got your categories of depreciation. You've got brand new in the box. You've got You've got in like new condition, you've got used, and then you have vintage, and all of these are sort of approached differently. So let me get into the difference here. One, depreciation is generally applied in one of two different ways, either on age or condition. Okay, so age is a very objective way to look at it, whereas condition is a very subjective way to look at it. You may ask me, Jeremy, how do I know which one to use? Well, my answer to you is always both. You want to look at both of those items because you may have that person that is very meticulous and that handles all of their stuff with white gloves, and then you've got the person that has a bunch of damage in the bedroom floor, and it wasn't the fire or the water that caused it. That's where it was when it when the loss occurred. So you've got those, you've kind of got those two extensions of people that may exist. Either way, you're going to look at both the age and the condition and apply the appropriate depreciation there. And by and large, it's an assessment. There's never going to be a clear cut, actual, accurate 100%. I know this accurately on this is what it is. Now, exact contents is going to give you an age, and it's going to do it by age, or it will take a percentage. But by and large, it's usually looked at on age. So if you've got electronic equipment, that is going to be determined nearly 100% by age. But you can get into this vintage stuff that that is going to be a concern to you, whether it may be a painting, it may be like some of these older books, like what Ricky was talking about. You may have some first edition books or something like that replacing it's not really an option. So those are generally put down at market value, and there is no depreciation that's applied to these things that are at market value. And I had a client that had a bunch of vintage musical equipment, and they also had a bunch of vintage or antique Civil War memorabilia. Those sorts of things, it's just kind of what the market is going to bear on that. So when you're applying that depreciation, you need to consider those things. The other thing that you have to also look at is obsolescence, and whether or not that thing is going to be determined to be obsolete. And one of those things could be if they had an 8-track player that was sitting in the garage and was pretty much non-functional at the time of the loss, then that thing is going to fall under what would be called obsolescence, unless they're using it as some sort of decorative piece. And then at the decorative piece, you can go and find, a broken 8-track player and it still works as decoration. So you're not necessarily looking for something that's functional. So you have to kind of look at those sorts of things and factor in the obsolescence of things. If you've got a laptop from 1997 and it says compact on the outside of it, the chances are that that thing is obsolete and wasn't in use or functional in any kind of way at the time of loss. So that's what you have to look at. Now, you can have a vintage piece of, like, we have a client that had an amplifier or a stereo receiver that was, from the 70s, that still ranked very, very high among, desirable components, that the only thing that we can find are refurbished and restored items, and when you find those items, they're considered vintage and there's no depreciation that's taken on them. But I guarantee you this, most carriers aren't going to know that, and you've got to tell them that it's vintage. And so when you get into depreciation, these are the considerations that you have to take. And Ricky and I were actually at a loss even on Saturday, and I kind of gave her sort of, this is going to be our running start at the depreciation on this unsalvageable stuff. And I kind of gave her the parameters. So you're going to want to work closely with your content specialist when it comes to depreciation. So Ricky, do you depreciate stuff for adjusters on behalf of them, kind of based on what you think it should be?
Yeah, so what I will do is, or what any of the staff, what we do is we kind of we get ages. So we'll start with ages, if that makes sense. So we'll start with ages. We age every item that we put in to the report. Encircle automatically depreciates based on standards. And but what we also document is the condition of the item, and then we will adjust it based on that. Honestly, if we see that they take really good care of their stuff, let's say they have clothes isn't a great example, because we typically don't depreciate clothes very much, because clothes change, replace clothes. The typical person does not have the same clothes, everything for 10 years. So we do like an average. But and then we'll adjust it. Oh, what do you? Some stuff I have, but I don't wear it anymore.
I've got underwear that's older than my kids.
I'll see my Facebook memories from like 8 years ago, and I'm wearing the same shirt.
Really? Yeah. See, I know I have it. It doesn't necessarily fit me the same. So, but maybe when I get there, I'll take a picture with it on. But we'll depreciate it from there, and we'll adjust depreciation. Antiques are always, like you said, we don't depreciate antiques at all. Vintage, the carrier sometimes pushes back a little bit and asks us to depreciate a certain amount, but we leave that up to the public adjuster. But when we provide the report, it will be a depreciated report. Specifically with what we do, we give you access to the platform that we use. So you can either have us do it, or you can go in and manually kind of mess with the depreciation if it's something you want to handle yourself, but it is provided.
Well, I mean, and the thing is that you have to understand kind of what those categories are. And once again, you've got new in the box, like new condition, used, and vintage. It's one of those 4 items, generally, or it's obsolete. So we can add a 5th one there. But generally, it falls in one of those first 3: new in a box, like new condition, or used.
Yeah.
And that's really that's sort of the bat that you're swinging at each and every item. And I generally just kind of make a general idea about how long they've lived in the house, because how long they've lived in the house will inform how old most of these items are. Now, I'm not saying that they wouldn't move and bring some things with them. You know what I mean? But those items are typically more sentimental. I know my mom, since I've been an adult, my mom and dad have moved like 3 or 4 times. And every time she moves, she sells every stick of furniture in the place. You know what I mean? She doesn't go to another house with the same furniture. I have no idea how she pulls it off, but that's what she does. She sells everything, kind of sells it off. And how long they lived in the house will many times inform you on how old stuff is. Maybe not everything. There's probably some things that move, like cookware and glasses and those sorts of things. Picture frames often kind of come with people. But again, that is really kind of that's my starting point on depreciation. Or at least that's my ceiling on depreciation, is how long they've lived in the house. And that's typically where I stop it. So you can kind of do whatever you want to in that regard, because the carrier is certainly going to look at your list of depreciation, and they're going to want to apply their own depreciation. And my argument for that is then why did you ask me to depreciate it? If you were going to apply your own depreciation, why was I asked to, within my inventory, to depreciate it? And they're probably going to throw some argument at you like, we have the right to conduct our own investigation. And then and I'm just going to say, based on what information and how did you arrive at this number? And so that's the other thing. When they challenge you on some of the depreciated items that you're presenting them, challenge them back when they depreciate stuff too much. I want to give you an example on something. Ricky and I worked a loss that I had previously mentioned that had a lot of high-end stereo equipment. When I say high-end stereo equipment, there was a pair of speakers that new were $120,000. The replacements were $120,000, and these were custom speakers. And because they were custom, but the carrier ended up depreciating these things all the way down. I think it was between $20,000 and $26,000. Do you remember this, Ricky?
Yeah.
They depreciated, and that was that. And I argued that depreciation, but before I could win the argument, the client had already purchased the replacement speakers. So at that point, it was kind of moot. But remember that was an inappropriate amount of depreciation on a lot of the stuff. They basically hit him with max depreciation, which is generally right around 80%. So when they're hitting it with max depreciation, alarm bells need to be going off. And those are things that you need to consider, because kind of what the tactic is we're going to make sure he doesn't replace these by over depreciating it and him not having the capital to actually go out and purchase the replacement. So beware of those things, and help your client when it comes to getting those items replaced. Any final thoughts, Ricky?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered it for now. I'm sure I'll think of something later, though.
Well, I mean, this certainly. Well, hang on a second. Okay, there's the bell. I mean, we certainly have not covered everything contents. This is a good running start at it. Guys, I want you to know that Ricky McGregor services are available nationwide. I mean, I know that you've probably heard if you listen to the Rumble quite a bit, I want you to know that you've heard her ad on there I voiced an ad, and we work closely on, obviously you can tell now, tons of claims together, but you can reach out to her at monarchclaimservices.com. Is that correct, Ricky?
Yeah, all my information is there, or get my information from you. My email's pretty long, so I won't repeat it, but
so you can, I would reach out to her on monarchclaimservices.com, where you can find all of her contact information there, and she is willing and ready to basically show up anywhere in the country and help you manage that inventory. So guys, my encouragement to you is don't do it alone. You've got enough stuff that you need your focus on, and contents is a very big portion of it. And I can tell you, Ricky will work with you. One of the last things that I want to tell you is that one of the you might want to try to figure out kind of what you think it might cost, and submit that cost for a professional inventory service to the carrier. Some of them will cover it, some of them will not. But what you don't want to do is have a whole bunch of work done thinking that the carrier is going to cover it, and then they don't. So you want to kind of make sure that you're checking with the carrier and see if that's going to be part of the covered loss, and whether it falls under an administrative fee or it's going to come out of coverage. So I've got one quick shout out to Mr. Kevin Turner, I believe is what his name. Yeah, I think is it Kevin Turner? Is he the guy that posted on the Paying of the Claims site that he had listened to over something like 2,000 hours or something like that,
yeah, it was a lot
of the rum, and I kind of messaged him on there. So that I think you've listened to all the hours, and he replied back to me that he had listened to all the hours probably twice. But we appreciate you, Mr. Kevin Turner, and
He's in the top 3% of listeners.
Yeah, and so I'm gonna, we've got a T-shirt on the way for you just as soon as I get those T-shirts made, and you were the thing that got us off the launch pad on that. And I got your size the other day that you messaged me, so understand that we are working on that. And a big thanks to you, and a thanks to all of you guys that are listening to us. We do this for you. If you enjoyed it, please click like and subscribe. And if you know somebody that needs to hear this information that's in the throes of a big, nasty inventory, make sure you click the share button and pass that on to them. But we will be back next week. And in the meantime, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And we will see you on the next one.
On the hammer, ready to ram you like the fire Salvageable. Yes, we're coming up, don't even try to diminish it. I won't start it, but I damn sure will finish it.